Yes, he could be.
But, that doesn't help the Redskins a whole lot this week. Redskins riding a 7-game losing streak going into the final week of the season, going up to New York, facing a tough road challenge, another division opponent, looking to finish the season on a high note and not be 0-6 for the first time in the division since 2009. What is it that the Redskins need to do? We've been talking for weeks about motivation. Is it rivalry games? Is it London Fletcher having his last performance? We've gone through all of those things and it hasn't worked. What do they need to do, Rich?
Well, I think this is London Fletcher's last game, regardless
game, yes.
of. Well, we're 99% sure. Looking at those tapes in the offseason, deciding who they're going to keep, and the other teams are looking at and decide who they might want to sign. Little bit more credence put in that last performance.
Chris, we talk about the motivation to perform for yourself, whether it's a contract year, last couple games of that contract year. How does that compare to getting together with the guys in a situation like you guys were in last year and saying, we need to win this for us versus I need to perform well for me?
I think you play a lot better when you're playing for your teammates. I can't imagine guys not putting it on the line, knowing it's going to be London's last game, and doing it as a favor to him. You should be doing it for you. They're going to be doing it for themselves anyway, but it's that extra incentive for him to be able to leave on a high note. Me playing with him, us playing with him before, believing that he's always been kind of slept on, as one of the best linebackers to ever play this game. So you definitely want to send him out on a good note.
Do you anticipate seeing a special type performance from London Fletcher? Of course, we talked about last week. There were whispers in the press box. If he can block this extra point, that would be the hallmark play that he wants to go out on. But does he have enough left in the tank, realistically, to be an impact player in this game?
Yeah, I had him with a pick in the end zone on that last drive, but it unfortunately didn't come through. But he's got it. I think mentally he'd like to. Could be the case where the mind is willing, but the body necessarily won't.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long season for him. But we'll see. Sometimes the guys can reach down and come up with something extra special. If he could get an interception and a sack and the Redskins would win, I think that would be a perfect cap to his career.
I mean, what do you, in terms of some of the other guys that may not be coming back, Santana Moss, the guy that we've mentioned, is that it's something that we haven't really talked about, but this might be the last game for Santana Moss. What do you expect to see from someone like him?
I expect the emotions to be high. He's a guy that's always played with a lot of passion. He plays best when he plays with a lot of passion. Mm-hmm. I know over the last couple of years that's been harder for him coming in as a third wide receiver as opposed to being a one. But Santana, again, Fletcher again, I think, this Giants team is a good team. They have home field advantage. But in a game that, quote, unquote, doesn't mean anything as far as playoffs and things like that, it's going to be up to these guys to get the players emotionally involved and get them passionate about playing football, and that's what they're going to need in order to win.
If there's one guy who's had a benchmark season by anyone's standards this year, it'd be wide receiver Pierre Garcon, who needed 10 catches to tie Art Monk's franchise record for receptions in the season at 106. Got 11. He had 2 games to go, got them all in that first game. So he sits at 107 right now, which is first for the Redskins, 35th all time. Head coach Mike Shanahan talked about that on Tuesday before the holidays and really put it in perspective for everyone. Let's hear what he had to say.
Mike, I know you've had some pretty amazing players over the years, Elway, Terrell Davis, et cetera, but the year Pierre is having, I know you're going through so much turmoil right now, but can you really appreciate the numbers Pierre is putting up this year?
Well, anytime you put up the numbers Pierre has, it really says a lot about a lot of people, not just Pierre, but the supporting cast as well. So been really pleased with how he's handled himself, how hard he works. You could see a year ago when he did play, he was the difference in us winning and losing. When he did come back, you could tell we were a different type of offensive football team. And this year's no exception.
Some people wondered when you signed him, was he really going to be worth elite receiver money? You feel like he's certainly shown he belongs up there now?
I sure think so.
Mike, sort of the uncertainty with your situation, did you address that at all with the players this week?
No.
Have you done it all in previous weeks?
No. Same thing we've been talking about since day one. All those things you address at the end of the season.
put yourself back in that position when they did sign Pierre Garcon. That was considered at the time, by a lot of national media types to be pretty big money for a guy who was a third receiver in Indianapolis. What were your reactions at the time, and what do you think now? How has that grown?
Well, my first reaction was, wow, that was fast.
Yeah.
That
was in the opening hours of free agency.
Opening minutes.
Yeah.
It didn't even take that long. But, I thought it was something of a gamble. The guy obviously was playing second fiddle to Reggie Wayne after playing second fiddle to both Harrison and Wayne there in Indy. I think his highest catch total was 70, which is respectable, but it's not. There's always the big debate, the number one receiver.
Right.
I think there's only about 8, maybe 10 number one receivers out there. So sometimes you just have to get the best guy you can. Leave that debate for another time. I think Pierre has shown, and there's a ways to go on the contract. Hard to say after 2 years, yes, he's justified it. But as Mike pointed out last year, his being in the lineup coincided with the team winning, and I don't think it was a coincidence. And second, then this year, leading the NFL in catches so far, setting the team record, being the one consistent game in, game out presence on this offense. He's got at least 5 receptions in all 15 games.
That's impressive.
Pretty impressive. So the consistency. So get another year or two like that out of it, and I think you can definitely say a rare free agency home run for the Redskins.
Now, Chris, you have not had the pleasure or terror of having to line up against a guy like that, but how does a guy with his ability factor into a defense's game plan going into a game against the Redskins?
You got to watch him.
Yeah.
You got to watch him to say the least. Reggie Wayne, not Reggie Wayne, I'm sorry. Pierre Garcon, he got signed because he always made the big catch. And when you're on a winning team and you make big catches, I think that makes your stock go up, as well as being a consistent receiver, that game in and game out type of guy. And then playing with him last year, learning what type of guy he is, how hard he actually works. Like you said, a home run for the Redskins in free agency.
Now, this year, last year they really wanted to see what he had to offer. They got the 88-yard bomb out of him to start the season, but it was pretty up and down with injury after that. Everyone kind of ended the season 4 500-yard receivers, and it seemed to be a pretty good mix out there. He's really been the guy this year. He has more receptions than the next 2 guys combined and almost the next 3 combined. There really isn't a second receiver for him. How important is that for the team to address that and identify that guy moving forward?
Obviously very important. The offense, they put up some decent numbers. They're top 10 in yards per play and everything like that. But was it really effective? No. I think they're around 20th in scoring still, somewhere around in there. So obviously that points to an inefficiency. Need a better red zone target, but need to be able to spread the ball around a little bit more. I just against the Cowboys, Kirk Cousins threw 34 passes, 17 targeted at Garcon. So that goes to point. He's making the catches, but he's also some games the only guy they're throwing the ball to. So yes, you need alternatives. It looked at times like Leonard Hankerson was starting to emerge into that guy, and then he'd disappear for a few games at a time. So they need to look at that either in the draft or in free agency, no question.
Still lots more to come. We're talking Alfred Morris. We're talking New York Giants coming up next. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back to segment number 2 of your Happy Holidays edition of This Week at the Park. Talking Alfred Morris, last year we saw a mammoth workload for the rookie back. We kind of knew going into the season that was going to have to drop back lest the wheels just fall off. You know, but 260 carries this year, despite playing from behind in a lot of games, that amounts to 1,213 yards, 7 touchdowns. Certainly fewer opportunities, certainly fewer red zone trips, fewer goal line opportunities. The numbers are down, but the number that really matters the most is 4.7 yards per carry. It's almost identical to the 4.8 he had last year, and that's a number that has been above 5 at various points this season. You know, if he had a healthy Darrell Young, if he was playing in a high-octane offense like he was last year, does he have a similar year to that, and are these numbers good for him?
I think, 1,600 yards is, that doesn't come along very often. I mean, that's a true great to do that back to back, averaging 100 yards a game. That's very difficult to do. I think if you'd taken this year, and if this year was last year, his rookie year, he'd be a Rookie of the Year candidate also. I mean,
sure.
It's still a very, very solid performance. I think if an offense, if the offense was working better as a whole, like we were just talking about with the second wide receiver, maybe Jordan Reed playing the whole time. That's another name we didn't bring up as a possibility. I think that I think that he could have been more effective. He could have averaged that 5 yards a carry because the first guy doesn't get him down.
Right.
That's one thing that hasn't changed.
Reckon Al.
Yeah, exactly. And he's just gonna roll right through that. So I think that he can do better. I think there are more 1,600-yard seasons in his future. Maybe on fewer carries, maybe on 280 to 300 carries instead of 335 like he had last year. So, I'd say so far 2,800 yards in your first year for a 6th-round pick.
Not bad.
Cash in your chips and say thank you very much.
Chris, this is a guy that you've lined up against in practice. We've seen what he does, performing on Sundays and Mondays and some Thursdays. But, what is he like to work with, to work against? What are his prospects of being able to sustain this over a career?
Very humble guy. Everybody knows about the car.
Yeah.
But
the Mazda.
His locker was close to mine his rookie year, and he just kind of did everything the veteran said and took heed to everything. And he's very deceptive to me. I mean, sometimes you don't really think he's that fast, and then he can shoot a gap, and then sometimes you don't think he's running that strong, and then he can break a tackle. So he's a smart running back too. I mean, the contact he's getting is not head-on contact. He knows how to move his body, knows when to fight for extra, when to fall, to try to preserve his body, if it's a such thing as a running back in the NFL preserving his body. But I see him getting better and better, and as he gets more familiar, gains the experience, keeps himself healthy, I see him being a premier running back in this league.
Now, last week he had a pretty healthy workload, 24 carries, 88 yards, a touchdown. I mean, that's pretty much what we've come to expect out of Alfred over his 2 years here. We haven't seen that over the last, during the losing streak. They've really struggled to move the ball. They've struggled in the second half, being behind by so much. We haven't seen that kind of workload from him. But, an important thing that plays off of him that they actually weren't able to do last week was play action. And Kirk Cousins talked about how they struggled a little bit in running play action. The Cowboys were able to take that away. When you have a running back that's running well like that and they're able to use him, what are some of the fundamentals in terms of play action that, a defense has to be able to respect?
Well, obviously you have to respect the running game, but I don't think it's so much the running game. I think a lot of times it's the situation. Sometimes when you're playing with the league as a defense, you take more risk. You say, this play might be a play action because they're trying to get back in the ball game. And I think that's what you're seeing a lot. I think when we play with the lead, you expect to run because it's like, well, they got a lead and they have a great running back. They have a good running game. Here comes the run, and now you even create the avalanche effect by throwing the play action in there. So it's just all about tendencies and how the defense is playing.
So sometimes you just don't honor that fake, right? You just say, okay, they can play action all day. We're up by 10, the heck with it, right?
We'll give them about 20, 30 yards this drive from gambling, but if we gamble and win, we make an even bigger play, and now we're ahead by that much more.
Now, Rich, the Redskins are back to being a top 5 rushing offense. They've kind of hovered around that in recent weeks. The Giants are a middle-of-the-pack, 15th ranked rush defense. This seems like a matchup that they should be able to exploit, but we've kind of seen the running game ebb and flow depending not even on who they're playing, but just kind of the game plan.
Yeah, I think when they played the Giants the first time, they really stacked up against Alfred Morris, not unlike they did, in their other games against, whatever back they were playing. They really stacked up to stop him, and instead of, Kyle Shanahan, instead of calling runs in the line that just weren't going to work, he either had Robert run. I believe he had his biggest rushing day of the year against them, and obviously passing. So, they weren't. What helped Alfred last year was teams were deathly afraid of Robert Griffin III running, because he could break off 20, 30, 40, 76 yards against the Vikings. This year with the knee brace, everything just not working right, they couldn't do that. So I think that has definitely worked against the running game in general, and Alfred Morris in particular.
Going into the last game of the season, an awful lot on the line. Head coach Mike Shanahan spoke to the media on Tuesday, giving a little bit of a preview. Here's what he had to say.
The season's over with.
Mike, do you have a better sense for Brian Orakpo's availability for Sunday's game?
He's limited today. I know we don't have to talk about it until tomorrow, and we got DY was full and Ryan Kerrigan was full. That doesn't have to be reported until tomorrow, but that's what we'll do tomorrow, so you guys get that information a little bit earlier. He had personal. It was personal, but it wasn't related to injury. Well, yeah, Compton's coming on for Nick Barnett, and we haven't made a decision, for Jordan Reed yet, what direction we're going to go.
Few roster shakeups going into the last week, nothing too big, but the availability of Brian Orakpo and getting after Eli Manning, how important is that to be able to create pressure, and do they have a contingency plan in place with Rob Jackson that will allow them to get the pressure they need?
I'll tell you, Rob is a little bit better in coverage than Rack, but Rack is definitely better rushing the passer. I mean, Jackson can get some sacks here and there, but he's not the pass rusher that he is. So, Eli was turning the ball over in bunches early in the year, and then he went through a stretch, including the Redskins game, where he wasn't turning over much at all. Now he seems to be back in a giving mood in the holiday season again. And that's going to be, and again, just like any quarterback, you get pressure in his face, and that's when he throws up the picks. So, I think that's something they're going to be looking for. Whether it's Orakpo rushing, maybe Kerrigan can get things going. He's got a sack in each of the last 2 games. So if Kerrigan can get something going, it's hard for me to see Orakpo playing. I mean, you're usually not lying on the field with a strained groin for a few minutes and coming back and playing the next week, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, you've matched up against Eli Manning before. Yeah. What were your takeaways from that? What is his game plan?
Well, Eli, different demeanor from his brother, but very productive ball player to be respected, obviously, with the Super Bowls. But Eli holds the ball sometimes. And you just got to take advantage of every opportunity you get to get pressure on him. And I believe if Brian plays, he'll be productive. But I think kind of like in the sport of boxing, I think styles make matchups. And I think I wouldn't count Rob Jackson out. I think Rob Jackson played very well. I think he was in a losing effort last year in New York.
Right.
He played very well at right end. Had an interception. And that's some of the plays we remember him playing. But if you just look at the film of that game, that left tackle knows who Rob Jackson is as well. So, and I think Rob Jackson is a guy who, from Brian Orakpo being back, really hasn't had as many opportunities and is kind of chomping at the bit to really show what he can do. As you mentioned, some of the free agents and an opportunity to show what you can do. So, I think he'll be good.
And after Brian Orakpo actually struggled to get to Tony Romo last week, we actually saw Rob Jackson get in there and get a hand on him. Yeah, I mean, and it's
I think that's the play that he limped.
Yeah, that was it. That was. We don't know for sure. No doctors on this staff.
Grab an ankle.
It really seemed like that was the play where he was hobbled. So we will see going into Week 17. Stay tuned for segment number 3. We're going to talk pass protection and the Giants. Stay tuned. And we're back, segment number 3 of This Week at the Park, Week 17 edition. And looking ahead to the Giants, this is really a Redskins team that needs to look internally before they worry about too many matchups outside. But one matchup that has gone pretty well in recent weeks, really since Kirk has taken over, is the pass protection. We saw one kind of ugly sack fumble in Atlanta, and since then he's been clean. It's been 7 quarters without a sack. This is probably the best stretch of pass protection we've seen all season long. Is it a system thing? Are they finally starting to come together as a team? What's going on?
Well, first of all, I think they have played a couple of pretty weak pass defenses. For one
that
thing.
helps.
And pass rush, pass defense starts with pass rush, from what from my observation, and then in second, Kirk is getting rid of the ball a lot quicker. That's just he came up in more of a pro-style offense at Michigan State. So that was part of the game. Robert's game is more, hang on to the ball, move around, and make a play.
Right.
And that that worked a lot better last year than it was this year. Again, maybe half a step slower. So I think between those two, and that and the line is certainly stepping up. You can't underestimate their role in that, but it's kind of when you have a sack-free 7 quarters, there's a lot of things going right on offense.
Now this is an offensive line that we think is built for mobility and athleticism and moving around. Seems to fit the mobile system a little bit better. But Kirk is much more of a pocket passer. Certainly we see the bootlegs, rollouts, and that sort of thing. But we've seen a lot of him passing from within the hash marks. For a defensive perspective, and both for the O-line as well, how much of a difference does that make adjusting to those two different playing styles from the quarterbacks?
It's a lot. As a pass rusher, you whether you want to or not, you're going to develop a clock in your head. And as he consistently starts throwing the ball, getting rid of it, let's say it's in 2 seconds, you watch the film and you'll see pass rushers start to rush. And if they haven't made a successful move in those 2 seconds, then they kind of stop. And then when he does so, it's like, oh, he still got it. So he's trying to hurry up and rush. And also the running game. Shanahan running game, not the slide, what is it? The zone running game is a lateral running game. So if guys, even on pass protection, even on pass rushing, if you pin your ears and come forward, say you get hooked on the run. So it's a lot of things you got to worry about, and a lot of things that the Redskins can do and I think they're starting to do very well to help the quarterback out.
I mean, that can only help Kirk going into this game. This is a Giants team that has certainly taken its lumps this season. We talked about the struggles that they had early in the season. 6-game losing streak, but they have gone 6-3 since then. They've actually played pretty well down the stretch, despite having a host of starters on injured reserve. A lot of familiar names there. They've lost some bizarre games recently. They got blanked 2 weeks ago, but then they go on the road last week to Detroit, which is a tough place to play, and they come away with a win. They go near your hometown.
A team that had everything at stake.
Absolutely.
Talking about beating those games meant nothing to the Giants in terms of the standings, but the Lions had everything on the line, got eliminated from the playoffs.
Now going home, is this a matchup that the Redskins can exploit? Because they did get blanked at home 2 weeks ago. So
Seattle, I
much
think,
different
is
team.
playing a little bit better. Yeah.
Understood. But, this is certainly not the intimidating place to go into in the Meadowlands. This is another team that doesn't have anything to play for. Is this, something where the Redskins can take advantage of the atmosphere there?
Yeah, they could. I mean, the Redskins, they won there 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, they almost won in one of the best games of the season when Robert threw a touchdown pass to Moss with less than 2 minutes left, and then Eli comes right back and launches a bomb to a Victor Cruz.
Don't remind us.
Yeah, sorry. Who also won't be playing among those guys on any reserve. Cruz won't. So, I think that this team can go in there with some confidence that they can play well and get the job done.
Talk about some of the key matchups that are coming up this game. You mentioned that Victor Cruz is out. A lot of their playmakers are either banged up, inconsistent, or totally out of this game. What do the Redskins need to focus on in terms of cutting off Eli's resources?
Well, they have their running backs are all banged up. I think that if you stop the run. I mean, I don't see why their philosophies had changed after 15 games this season, or after however many games that Jim Haslett's been here. Worry about stopping the run first, and force Eli to beat you. Now he will beat you sometimes, but he should make his share of mistakes in trying to do so. So, I think it's that simple. Again, why change after 15 games?
Very true, Chris. Schematically looking at what they try to do on offense, what are some things that the Redskins can attack as a system, things that they should have learned?
Well, it's a divisional game.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I noticed when the media was asking the Eagles about Tony Romo playing or not, I'm like, it's a division game. Like, we don't care who plays. We know each other so well.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to come down to execution. So I agree. Just stop the run, play the quarterback. They know the tendencies. The Giants know the tendencies, and vice versa. So it's just going to be a game where it's going to come down to making plays. It's going to be Eli Manning versus the Washington Redskins secondary, which the D-line and everybody plays a part of that. I mean, as well as the same thing as far as the Redskins offensively. Victor Cruz being out, obviously he's a talent, but from a schematic standpoint, it may help because now Eli is not looking for a certain particular thing to work and trying to force it in. He's like, okay, let's just work the offense and work the ball around. So everybody has to be on their P's and Q's this week.
Now, we would be remiss to not talk about special teams, which has been a storyline all year, but things have been quiet recently. They had a pretty decent game. Well, save for one.
Second special team.
But this is certainly a special teams unit that has made some adjustments. When you talk about it still being an improvement over fewer games when you give up a 62-yard return, obviously this is a unit with deficiencies, with some problems, with probably a major overhaul in its future. What do they need to do this week besides the obvious in kind of cutting off those return lanes? What's important this week?
Well, after that first return, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you like to play?
Exactly.
But other than that first return, they did pretty well. I think, though, they still have to play. I think this sounds crazy, but they almost play their best special teams when they're scared. Punt it out of bounds. Don't be too proud not to punt it out of bounds. Pooch kick it and don't give them the 25 and don't give them the long return. That seems to be the only way to guarantee that you're not going to give up the big play.
Chris, can they finish it out with a win?
Yes, they can. Special teams give Kirk the field position all day long. He's playing well. All he needs is a win.
There you have it. Got to finish out with a win. For Chris, for Rich, I'm Brian Tinsman. This has been This Week at the Park. Remember to tune in Monday morning for the Monday Morning Redskins Roundup. We'll talk about the game. Take care.